was really inspiring and informative presentation, and you could have continued for the next hour and I wouldn't have interrupted you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I can, if it's of any benefit, I can give you an indication of, say, for example, the amount of funding that we provide for Youthreach. So, for example, in 2020, we would have provided in total between pay and non-pay 5.5 million just in Limerick and Clare, in Limerick and Clare. Okay. Now, as you'd expect, of that 5.5 million, the majority of that is going on salaries. So about 3.4 million of that is going on salaries across our 10 centres. Okay. And the remainder is in terms of non-pay. But we also have put in also, say, roughly about 500,000 or so in terms of specific learner supports for Youthreach participants as well, you know. But if anybody is interested in those figures, I can send them on to you, Angela, later.
Okay,
but
very
just
good.
to give you an idea of how they're broken down between pay and non-pay, etc. You know.
Yeah, very good.
Now, just in Limerick and Clare ETB as well, very much like in Mary Immaculate College, we are developing much more centralised learner supports. So we have recently signed a contract with a company called My Mind, MYMIND, My Mind, and they will provide all the counselling services that we require for our learners. So our Youthreach learners also can avail of that service. So, for example, any of our learners can get 6 counselling sessions free of charge from the FET division, you know.
Okay.
So that has helped enhance the learner supports for our learners. We recently also invested 385,000 in terms of specific ICT devices, laptops and tablets for our learners. And they're really targeted, and it goes back to a question you raised earlier. They're really targeted at learners who might be coming from more marginalised backgrounds, where their parents might be unemployed, and they don't have the financial means of purchasing a laptop or a device. So we have a loan scheme where learners can actually be lent out a laptop, say, for example.
And Paul, has that come because of COVID?
That has, in the main, that has come because of COVID. However, apart from COVID, a positive lesson there is that we are expecting learners to come to our Youthreach Centre and yet go home to an environment where they don't have maybe technology at home, they don't have a home computer, but yet we expect them maybe to produce certain assignments or etc. You know, so we're looking at this as one of the advantages or the positive outcomes of COVID as well. You know.
Okay, very good.
Yeah. Now, can I just come in there, Angela? Paul highlighted something there. I think what's important just for everybody to realise that I am accountable for a report on Youthreach is one of them specialised training providers. I won't go into the details. All those learners at the moment, our department has encouraged them to come in on site, despite that we are in a level 5 lockdown, and other programmes, and Paul can talk about that. Other learners, maybe at level 5 and VTOS programs, etc., can work from home and do their studies from home. But the reason being is going back to what I said earlier, relationships, that one-to-one, that interaction. So the most vulnerable groups that are within further education and training at the moment are being prioritised to come into the centres. So if I put a request into Paul that I need an extra room in a building now so we can spread out a group, they'll be prioritised.
Okay, very good.
Just to let you know a little bit more about the vulnerability of the group we're talking about.
Yeah, and the other thing to remember is that at home, a lot of these learners, the Youthreach learners, don't have maybe a normal, say, quote unquote, a normal family structure at home, you know. And I think, as Martin said, for them to come in to our Youthreach centre, where to have that kind of more stable environment, safer, more stable environment, COVID or no COVID, you know, and where they can meet their mentor and their peers face to face is very important for them as well, you know.
Okay, very good. Questions. What in Youthreach are the consequences of non-compliance for the young person? So for instance, if they are in Youthreach and they don't attend, or are there specific, do you have I presume you have some sort of a learning or agreement at the very beginning when they come in?
Yeah. Just to explain that, we have an interview process and also an induction process. So over a week you're inducted and you have your vision, your learner charter, your code of conduct and your behaviour, and rights and responsibilities of every member of the Youthreach community are critical. We believe in the restorative practice, and I didn't know it was called that, but I had been involved in it for 25 years. And it's very much about using it as an opportunity when somebody is not complying with a code of behaviour, and very simply sitting down with them, finding out what the problem is, addressing the problem, and also how it's impacting on others. And, bullying would be an example that we would have very low tolerance on that. We're not in the nature of throwing people out or terminating people from the programme. That is the last resort. And very seldomly would happen, but zero tolerance on violence. So, it might be 2 strikes, it might be 3 strikes, it might be 1 strike and you're out. But management make that decision, and then if there's an appeal, there is an appeal process. But ultimately, there would want to be clear evidence that management and staff in that centre put huge time and effort, time and time again, each time there had been an incident, and working down through the process of putting supports in place, whatever the ongoing, we'll call it, offence is. And then at the end of it, unfortunately, it may be a decision for a suspension, it may be a complete termination, and then there's an appeal, and they would be reviewed by senior management obviously afterwards. That's completely the process.
Okay.
And Angela, I'm not sure how familiar the members of the group are with restorative practice, but restorative practice would be traditionally in the justice area, but that now has been really brought into the whole education area in Ireland for this. Formally brought in as a restorative practice mechanism, probably since roughly 2010, and I was involved in the original rollout of restorative practices in Limerick schools way back then. So, but Martin said maybe we had restorative practice in Youthreach even prior to that, without it being labelled as restorative practice, but it's a much more formal setting now across a lot of our education settings, especially in Limerick, because we were very strong through our children's services committees at the time, which are now CIPSI, the child and youth services, in developing and rolling out and training people on the restorative practice methodologies.
Yeah. No,
just to come in that one more time, Angela, if you don't mind. Just on that, we always try and catch with one net or another net if somebody doesn't make it. So, for example, if somebody was terminated from a centre for a serious offence, and I don't want to hang in the negative, but there's a huge positive, and the positive is they get to meet me again afterwards, and I would work out a plan with them to support them in presenting again for an application to a different centre.
Okay.
And I would
And
put various plans and mechanisms. It could be counselling, it could be supports in place, and they get another fresh start, maybe, you know, in another centre.
okay, very good. And Martin, one of the things we did talk about, could you discuss very briefly the Youth Encounter project as well and the justice element?
Okay, I'll try and simplify it very. The Youth Encounter project. The Youth Encounter project, I was on the board of management actually, so I'd be fairly aware of it. It's a little bit like Youthreach, but it's actually, I would call it a Youthreach program for younger people from approximately up to the 14. So it's early school leavers that have left primary school and that are under 14. There are only 5 of them in Ireland, and they have the same status as a primary school. So they would have the same structures and mechanisms as a primary school. And our ETB would actually give them extra funding for extra teaching hours as well. So you're looking at the primary school mechanism. There's a board of management. The manager of the primary school of the Youth Encounter project is recognised the same as the principal, but they would use similar practices to Youthreach to support and retain very, very young people in the school. I suppose what we do know is, Paul mentioned the budgets. If you look at the budget there, and I might be digressing, but I think it's important, the younger you go, the less it costs with interventions and the greater the outcomes. That's completely a known fact. And, you know, I could give you some astounding figures around, you know, how much Youthreach costs per learner. But like the other argument on that is, if you turn a young person around, and I'm also responsible for the prison education centre, it costs an awful lot more to have somebody in a prison than it does to support them and go on to become an apprentice and go on in a career. So does anyone want to ask me about the Youth Encounter project? But it is very similar in the model, but it's the primary school model, but it's an earlier intervention to work with very, very young people to get them back on track. Young people from the Youth Encounter project would stay there and maybe go on and do even their leaving cert. But some of them in Limerick City, where there is one Youth Encounter project, they actually finish maybe at junior cycle level, and they might apply to come to Youthreach. So we would work with them and collaborate with them.
Yeah, that's, I suppose the point is, I just wanted to make that you're very connected to other initiatives around children who have left formal schooling. Martin, I got a question on from Igor about how do you support career development of the young people in Youthreach? Do you have a career counselling service? I know we do, but if you could talk about it, that create individual career, you do create individual career plans.
I think that the process starts though when they come in for the first interview, because in there you want to find out who they are, where they'd like to go, and you map out you nearly map out the learning plan. And in that interview, you're holding them to account when you meet them down along the line as well, that they're not performing or they're not working as hard as they promised in the interview. So it starts there. We would have guidance counsellors across all our centres, and we would also have advocates. And the role of the advocate is similar to a counsellor, and really they're responsible for putting, supporting young people in developing a transition plan, a plan to move on where they want to go. They also get them work experiences and work placements. They bring in employers. They also bring in learners that were with us before to do presentations, because they do ones that are even better than mine. Right, because who do you best? They're excellent role models. So there is guidance people, and it's very, very important that a learner has a vision where they want to go. It's as important as our vision. So that's the piece. Then is the key working or the mentoring. That we have a designated member of staff that follows up with them and keeps an eye on them and supports them in making the transition on. And the learners tend to come back and tell us their good stories and their bad stories, and that keeps the staff going. The piece that Paul and I are going to be working on, I suppose, is maybe the mentors should be doing a little bit more afterwards and follow up when they move on to other courses as well.
Right. Very good. And
Okay.
one asked, is this a pilot program or something that is going on in the future too? But it has been ongoing since it's actually Youthreach started in the 1980s.
It started. The first one was in Limerick City in South Hill in 1989. February 1989 it opened up, and yeah, somewhere along the way I did hear the word pilot being mentioned again recently by somebody. I suppose it is ongoing as a pilot because it's always evolving and changing and moving and like that. But it is, Paul will testify to this, it's mainstreamed now and it's an integral part of further education and training.
Okay, very good. And Barbara has...
Sorry, Angela.
No, go on.
It's like a lot of pilots initiatives to start in Ireland, I'm sure in other countries as well, and continue to go on. I often compare it to the soldiers in the US Army still get an allowance, a beef ration allowance that was introduced in the Second World War.
Very good. Very good.
Just to say around information recruitment and guidance, we also have designated information recruitment guidance offices in a lot of our FET centres across the region, and sometimes we would ask the learners maybe to go with a guidance or a mentor maybe to them as well, just to get an independent discussion going as well around other programs. The challenge for me, I suppose, is, sorry, Paul.
No, go ahead, Martin.
The challenge for me is that FET has so many courses to offer. I'm hosting nearly every 3 weeks with my managers, somebody new coming in, to show the managers that we have apprenticeships, traineeships. My next session with all my management team now is the manager of information recruitment and guidance is coming to give a broad overview. So there's a huge, FET is very much, and even people that we fund are saying it, there's a huge vision in FET now, and there's huge connectivity for learners to progress. And that's not just us saying it. Everybody sees that we are working to plan where people are going, and there's huge opportunities there.
Yeah.
And
so
connectivity.
A key aspect of that, Angela, would be, and somebody did mention, the career pathways, etc., and connection to the labour market. Like, for example, in our apprenticeship, we have two very, very large training facilities. In one of those training facilities, we have even aircraft. So in that aviation school, we would bring a Youthreach class into that facility, and suddenly to see a live aircraft in front of them being worked on by the aircraft maintenance apprentices, we might bring them then into our large motor mechanic workshop, where to see apprentices working on the different rigs and engines, etc. We might bring them down into an electrical workshops or plumbing workshops or etc., or bring them into our hairdressing workshops, our beauty workshops, even into our accountancy workshops. It's not all the crafts. There's a lot of apprenticeships now in the non-craft area. Say, expose them to ideas on, are you interested in doing an apprenticeship or a career in accountancy? If you are, we can bring you to show what's happening with our apprentices in the accountancy area, etc.
Okay, very good.
Yeah. Can I just come in on that one now? I'm actually working in a training centre, and I would try and do the tours for the younger people. And just something to say, the big aspect when I started doing the tours, I got lost once, number one, but it's such a big building. But the key aspect is when the learners and teachers and the manager were leaving to get back on the bus, they spoke about changing their curriculum and making their curriculum more relevant. And I think that's a key aspect to take from today's presentation. They went down, as Paul said, into rooms where they now saw you need maths and you need literacy in order to become a carpenter. And they saw roofs being made, and they could see why you need to have mechanical drawing as well. So it's very important to have work placements and bring people on tours, because, there were subjects I didn't like and I suffered with them, but you'll suffer with them to get to where you want if you have a vision. And I think that's very, very important as well.
Okay, Paul, I've got a request. If you could stop sharing the screen, just to see, because people would like to see your faces. Sorry. Paul or Martin, just one question. the students on the come into Youthreach, the idea is that they do get a certificate or some if they're not doing the Leaving Cert applied or the Junior Cert, that if they're doing a course on, say for instance, hospitality or beauty, that they do get a qualification at the very end of it.
Yeah, the core courses I highlighted there earlier, Junior Cert, Leaving Cert Applied, and QQI. The expectation is every young person will leave with a level 3, level 4 major award or a Leaving Cert. That's an expectation. They do attend, and we work with other provision within FET, Limerick College of Further Education, and they go on to do taster programs like night classes in hair and beauty as well.
Okay.
So, but what we're saying is to move on, you know, and progress on to level 5s. We make the curriculum, the program very, very interesting. But yeah, you're sitting. I mean, the key aspect for me is I go to a graduation, and Paul goes to a graduation ceremony every year and hands out the same certs the young people will get if they went to school, or of the same equivalent. That's a key aspect for everybody. It's a milestone because there's so much that goes on to get the young people there, in challenging them, giving out to them, praising them. And it's a day of real excellent celebration where we can all go, job done and closed. And it's a very important day for everybody.
Okay, thanks, Martin. And I'd say this is for Paul. It's in relation to the data collection. Do you get any information about these young people, who they are? It's mainly contained in that. I presume you collect all the data around the students. Do you get in touch with any of them in any way? Or as you said, they come on their own, I suppose, to follow up after they've done Youthreach, where they end up, or?
Yeah, we have, say for example, we have a person. Well, it's Solas is the national. Solas is SOLAS, is the National Further Education Training Authority. They have a staff member embedded in the Central Statistics Office that's based in Cork.
Okay, right.
And we can at any time, naturally it's anonymized, but we can track a class. Say if a class finished in 2017, we can still track that class in terms of where they are today, because the CSO, the Central Statistics Office, has access to every database in the country. So in terms of revenue, if the person is paying taxes, if they're working, they're paying taxes. So they're on the revenue database, and the CSO can connect into the revenue database. We have what is known as the PPSN number, which is the unique identifier. And then if the person is maybe in Mary I doing a course, where Mary I's database is also accessible by the Central Statistics Office, and we know the person finished further education in, say, 2017, and they've gone on to do higher education to date, you know. So we can track it through the Central Statistics Office.
Okay. Now, Denia has a question.
Hi, thank you. I just, I'm curious, what's the relation with the governmental structure? Do you have independence to run your programs independently? What is the Ministry of Education?
Yeah, as I said earlier, Denia, the department, we had one single Department of Education and Skills up till recently. We now have two departments. So we have the Department of Education that now just looks after primary education and post-primary education. And we have a new department now of, it's actually, I think it's the department that has the longest number of words in it. There's 10 words in it. It's actually the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science. And I'm going to test you later. Remember that. So the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science. And that is now the kind of the overall governmental department. And underneath that, you have, say, the Higher Education Authority, which would have responsibility for higher education institutions like in Mary Immaculate College where Angela is. And then you have SOLAS, SOLAS, who is the National Further Education and Training Authority. Now, what happens on the ground is we do our own planning, okay? So we decide locally how much we want to invest in, say, Youthreach in terms of pay and non-pay. For example, if we wanted to develop a new Youthreach centre, that's up to us. So we basically, on a yearly basis, do our local planning. We decide on the number of courses, like in 2019, we had 2,600 courses. We could put on 3,000 courses, okay, if we wanted to. However, what we do then is we budget each course. And in totality, we send our budget request to SOLAS, and they give us, you know, if they have the money, they give us the actual funding. But they don't actually say, oh no, you can't put on that course, or you can't put on that course. That's up to us to do that. So we would engage locally, say, with a lot of industry groups. We'd engage with what is known as the Regional Skills Forum. The Regional Skills Forum is there to identify labour market skill needs going forward, okay? And through that Regional Skills Forum, so for example, I know at the moment that there's a demand in this area for med tech jobs, okay, and pharmaceutical jobs as well. That's and logistics. You know, there's just some areas. You know, so we already are planning. I have been planning for some time courses that will be available. So we are doing courses now with in pharmacy and med tech that we wouldn't have done before because we're responding to the identified need, the current identified need. You know.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Just a comment from Glenn, who's just, you know, this was a comment earlier on around, you know, the academic and vocational area, and it's just comment that it's the arbitrary divide between social status given to white collar over blue collar professions that quality of value, which I think is absolutely, I mean, it's what Martin we were talking about before the presentation started, that it really prevents, I think, society seeing the value of, you know, this idea that, yeah, these young people have huge value, and just because they may have left school, the formal school system early, doesn't mean that they should be thrown on the dump heap or etc.
Not at all. I think that's what has kept me in the job for years, to see potential, you know, and to see somebody blossoming. And even though I'm not working in a centre now, just going to the graduation ceremonies or hearing the stories, that's the buzz in it. And that's, you know, I think that's why people want to work in this area, just to see young people change and move on and measure. I think that what's very, very important is, I think if I've learned to know anything over the last couple of years, is to celebrate any success, no matter how big it is, small or big. It's kind of now in general, I tend to appreciate anything now that's positive.
And if we're honest about it, in Ireland, there has been too much of a hang-up with our children going to third level colleges.
Oh, I completely agree.
You know? We don't have the Scandinavian model, and now we've been doing a lot of work. We've been visiting. You know, I've been in Germany and Finland, etc., and looking at their alternative models. You know, and it's very comforting that the current provost, president of Trinity College there, I could get you the article, came out and said that in Ireland, there's a lot of learning to be done by our parents and our career guidance staff, that higher education is not the only route for our learners. And we need to get away from this hang-up, you know.
Yeah.
And the other thing he mentioned was this idea that further education and training is a second choice. He said it's not. It's a first choice.
Yeah.
For some people, their first choice is to go to university. For other people, their first choice is to go into an apprenticeship. Not a second choice. It's their first choice. So this hang up that going to a university is slightly on a higher pedestal than being an apprentice, that we have to move away from that thinking in Ireland. But I suppose it comes probably from our history, that traditionally the Irish, the British conflict in Ireland for generations, and Catholics in Ireland weren't allowed really to go to university. It was mainly for the Protestant population, So I suppose then when things began to change in Ireland, everybody wanted their child to have a university, because we were denied that for years.
Certainly for so long.
But that's the challenge. And sorry, Angela.
No, I was just going to say that whole issue. I mean, I'm here in Mary I, and we have students here that are we're trying to counsel, it's a small group. They shouldn't be here to be doing other things. And it's the amount of time you spend counseling them to, that it's not a failure not to complete the degree. It's better if you go and be happy doing something else.
Yeah.
It's It's one of the things that I've learned.
That's really interesting, Angela.
Our guidance counsellors, and in Ireland as well, we have this. What is it? The system where schools gain so many kind of the league table. The league table. And the league table is based on, part of it is based on your progression rate from your school to third level. There's no mention about progression rates from your school into apprenticeships or anything like that. Because even our league tables are very biased towards the academic route, So structurally, we have certain things correct in Ireland, but also we have certain things that needs totally remodeling and restructuring.
Very good.
Yeah, I think, Paul, what struck me there when you say that is, we're here to talk about early school leaving, and it's a challenge, but there is early tertiary education leaving, early third level leaving. We all would know people, and as you said it there, Angela, that didn't get the guidance, went through the CAO system and have arrived, and there's a little bit of stigma attached to it. I have personal family members that would have gone and found college wasn't for them, and then went off and found the apprenticeship. So that is a challenge there that needs that for our education system as well.
True.
It's a key one.
Okay, I think we've all the questions answered, and we've ran over time as always. Oh, there was just one thing from Marianne. Can you talk more about the whole centre approach?
Yes, the whole centre approach is about, first of all, having a team, and a team with various disciplines, not just teachers or instructors. It's about having, as you mentioned earlier, guidance counsellors. A key aspect Paul mentioned earlier was having a therapist as a member of the team. And it's a multidisciplinary team to meet the various needs. And I know I spoke about assets, but it's to look at all the different needs. So you have learning support, you have sports and recreation, you have the vocational home economics. So it's a team approach, a shared vision, and a multidisciplinary approach. And it's the bigger aspect of it there. It's also that there's, senior management. It's about having the right systems in place, policies, procedures as well. It's not just one aspect of it. So there's the governance and management supporting the governance and ensuring, good compliance as well. So it's looking at all of that. Just
the other thing in that as well, I mentioned earlier, what we're maybe also the question was related to kind of the much more integrated approach across further education and training. So literally across the road from Mary Immaculate College, we have a large centre there in our O'Connell Avenue campus. You might know it as the Red Tech building, Angela, or the MTI. It has different names. But in there, for example, there's 75 Youthreach learners. But going in the same door is adults who may have left school early and have literacy issues, Going in the same door, there may be other learners on different types of provision as well. But the entire campus is integrated. So there's one learning hub. So the learning hub is available, kind of a learning hub stroke library is available to all learners. Doesn't matter whether you're a Youthreach learner or you're a learner at 60 years of age. They all use that common actual facility, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's very important around that is, you know, you might have your provision in there, but it is part of an overall centre because you're sharing resources, you're being more efficient, you're being more effective. But O'Connell Avenue is a good example that Paul mentioned. I actually was the manager of that centre, and the big change for me is for about 3 years I managed it as a standalone youth provision, but then other programs came in and saw what we did. So the community outside got to see the relationship between the learners and the staff, and it was that whole community idea. So people used to come and present and say, well, my neighbour said that you're very good with the young people and that, you know, you get on very well and it's very good discipline here. So it was a market, it also marketed, and people saw the experience and shared it. It wasn't just young people. So we would be very much adamant that a youth provision is part of a fit centre, and it's a microcosm of the community.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it. Now, one of the, I just commented, very much like to see one of these centres someday. Would it be organised in a programme of study? Like, it's something we probably could discuss. But if anyone is interested to coming to Limerick, we can certainly put people in touch, etc.
Yeah, well, if it was appropriate, Angela, as well, I'm not sure how long this program lasts, but I'm sure we could arrange. We're looking at developing virtual tours of our centres. Okay. So if we do develop a virtual tour of one of these centres, we can pass you the link, and then people could actually go through the actual centre, you know.
Okay.
So I have to go.
Okay. No, thank you so much, Paul. Okay. Would you mind?
Sorry for the disturbance during the thing. I didn't realize, but somebody came in with a very fancy bun for me. So I'm going to enjoy. I'm going to enjoy this now.
Enjoy it.
You know,
I knew it was food. I knew it had to be food.
You, so I think Martin would love it there.
Thanks, Paul. Send me over one.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Okay.
Nice meeting you. Hopefully someday we might meet you face to face in Ireland, okay?
Okay.
Or maybe,
thank you, Paul.
Maybe visit your own country as well.
Okay. Thank you.
So we talk to you soon. Thanks, Martin.